Question everything. So, when you think about Hartford, Connecticut, and the inner city areas of where the Aboriginal Negroes are dominant at, you also got to think about the economic oppression that they are under. You know, especially all our areas of where we're from and where we reside at. You know, my father is a Black Panther inner activist out in Hartford, Connecticut. Big shout outs to my father, Mike Fothergill, for sure. But at the end of the day, you know, when it comes to the destruction of our inner cities where the Aboriginal Negro live at, it's a lot of variations of what you can actually speak on what happened. Let's just make that clear. You know, we can talk about the race riots, I always do. We can talk about the different movements and processes that happened through the KKK, and we could talk about the Democratic Party and how they systematically helped starve us of resources. And these are serious major issues, majorly for sure. But we also can talk about how taxes and how the taxes was constantly, continuously raised in these areas that caused a lot of the factory businesses and a lot of the businesses to leave, literally. You know, when the factories, businesses was all throughout our areas, especially in the cities, they brought in a lot of jobs as well as a lot of revenue to the actual communities that they was around, thus giving great opportunity to the people that lived in those areas. And once the taxes started to get higher, those factories, they could no longer exist in those communities, in them areas. They wanted lower taxes and they needed to go to places that would actually give them lower taxes. So a lot of them ran. Even a lot of them ran overseas as well. Trump talks about that. But at the end of the day, that also did a domino effect, because once the factories ran and the money ran, then also the small businesses ran into, you know, major problems because the money was leaving. So a lot of them left or ran out of businesses themselves. And in turn, it caused a collapse in those communities. And most of those inner cities that had these type of factories, they fell completely. Sort of like Waterbury as well. That used to make the actual brass buckles and stuff for the military. A lot of these different areas just collapsed completely. You can still drive around some of these areas where the big buildings are still sitting there and ain't nothing happening with them now because they're abandoned. And today, those inner cities show forth and show proof of that. Detroit, you know what I mean, and many others. You know, and without any economic movement to re-establish and re-stimulate those communities in those environments, then they ain't gonna never ever come out of the depression that they're in. And that's just what we see. We see communities that are devastated based off of just lack of resources and lack of economic growth. It's not that the United States don't got the money to reestablish these communities in these cities. They do. They have buku money. They tell you that. How do you know? They gave $43 billion to Ukraine. Literally. That could have went to the inner cities all around, thus helping poverty and bringing back small businesses and bringing back, you know, some factories. But that would definitely change the depression that's going through these cities at this time. Not to mention, they also bringing in what? Thousands of illegal immigrants and financing them to come through and come into these communities, but not giving any resources back to the communities, but giving them an economic floor to be able to stand on for themselves, to be in these communities at the same time while the American citizens and you and I are struggling to make ends meet when it comes to the cost of living in these communities. You know, all this stuff is done systematically on purpose. Because at the end of the day, when these infrastructures went down, the Aboriginal Negro was the one who actually suffered the most. We were, because our communities got hit the worst. And this is just a reality, and this is what you see when you walk around your communities and you see all these abandoned businesses, all these abandoned houses. It's just a sad state. And it's not that the mayor and the government and all these people don't know. They know this. They see it. The key is they don't care. And because they don't care, they ain't doing nothing about it. And we're not talking about all nations, because you can go to Park Street in Hartford, in Weathersfield Avenue, and Maple Avenue, and all these different areas, and guess what? They got a lot more businesses than the areas that the Aboriginal Negroes are in. And this is done on purpose, because you starve people out that you don't want to deal with. You know, you give them an economic block that they can't get over without any type of resources coming to the community. And eventually crime will start to rise, because poverty will start to grow more and more in the community. And once that poverty grow, crime grow. And once the crime grow, then you can capitalize off that crime when you got a target market of people that you don't want to work with or deal with. You just make more prisons. And then you add more police and more police departments to those communities and push a bigger budget for the police department instead of for economic growth in those communities to push back the impoverished people, the poverty, to lift the people out of the poverty through economic growth. So now you got all these police in your community, and then they establish more private prisons, and they can capitalize off of you being impoverished and actually needing economic growth, needing resources to sustain yourself in order for you to survive. And this is what you see is happening, not just in Hartford, but all over the cities, everywhere you go, that you see the Aboriginal Negroes. And this is done on purpose. And then you will get the colonizers' actual media and mainstream newses talking as if we're doing this to ourselves. That's impossible, because we don't control any type of resources coming to our communities, nor do we control any type of strong economic push that can happen in our communities if we can't get any type of funding and federal funding and governmental funding coming down to the communities. That's just the reality to it. And if the politicians and the appointed representatives that's supposed to fight for your local areas ain't fighting for your communities in your state to be able to get any type of resources or economic growth for your nation in that area of community, then ain't nothing gonna happen. And that's just the reality. See, they fought for the black and brown community, they say, but notice how the brown community is getting more restoration in the form of resources than you, and you're not. This is done on purpose. And this is why our people call for reparations, because we need some type of economic growth. We need some type of justice in the form of resources in order for us to reestablish ourselves. And that's everywhere in the United States that you go, where you see us at, where you see our people are dwelling, our communities are starving. So with that, I give much respect and much props and much big ups to my father for the work that he have put out there in Hartford, Connecticut, because he has done a lot of work since I've been born and before I was born. And for y'all that know Mike Fothergill, send him a shout out and understand that his fight always been for our people out there in Hartford, Connecticut, and everywhere you see Black Panthers and other people that are organized and established in the community as a grassroots, trying to really do something for the community. Not talk game, but actually bringing real tangible things to the community to help the people. Real programs to the community to help the people. Real movements to the community that establish things to help the people. Because that's what it's about. Anybody can talk you to death, but it's based off of what you can do that'll really actually change the environment that we are actually in. And that's what we need. And we need to get on these representatives that's supposed to represent us to do these things immediately, expediently. Because if we don't, guess what? Your grandbabies and your babies are gonna have to see poverty. And in that poverty, they're gonna see crime. And in that crime, they're gonna see chaos like death, early deaths, and mass incarceration of your loved ones. And it won't stop until you put boots on ground and start to push this reality that we need economic growth and we need resources brought back to our communities. And we need justice.